I went frantic. Thank you and welcome. Welcome to this amazing evening tonight. I feel hugely privileged to be hosting Matt Macartney and you at your club, and my club actually. For me, I learned to row properly in the waters just the other side of that lock. There is the bells. We understand Mike Sprackling is ringing one of those bells, so you'll believe his will win, because he'll be racing the others. And it was those influences, the rowing community, for those who don't know, and Mike Sprackling, a famous coach here, that really shaped young Sarah coming out of the cocoon of Cambridge rowing and into what was the squad rowing. And we boated from Longridge, the Scout Huts, and after about a year or two of that, we were lucky enough to come here at the old club. And every break we'd come to the club and we'd connect with folk like you. And it just normalised our world. We were training 3, 4, 5 times a day, and it was so intense and we had such ambition, but we needed others in our system. We needed to learn from others, and I'm utterly grateful that I had that influence, and it definitely kept me rowing for longer than I would have if I hadn't had that. And then when the time for me stopped to want to go backwards in boats, it was 2009. I'd done my 3rd Olympic Games, I'd done 7 World Championships, and I'd had my heart broken and my heart filled through the results that we'd achieved through that. And I realised the time for me was to step away. I was lucky enough to start to understand this world of leadership and coaching. And I introduced Mac here because young Sarah, who knew nothing, was trying just to remember the models of leadership, was lucky enough to go to Embercombe, which is the place I'm sure Mac will talk around. And I was able to have access to his wisdom and presence, not through the courses that he runs and still runs, but through walking alongside him and seeing what he was doing. And for me, that could not be unseen. Those influences couldn't be changed. And I feel a real forward standing here because I know so many of you will be doing more for the climate emergency than I do. However, I hope through his influences, Dave's influences and others, I'm beginning to do my bit and stepping into more of that. And tonight genuinely isn't about me, it's my only job to host and set Mac up, because I'm going to pass over to him so he can share some of his thoughts, his wisdom, and give us a little bit more energy to keep the journey. Thanks, Mac.
A few hours ago, I was at the top of the valley that we call Embercombe, and I'm building a log cabin. And the sticks, as the woodman calls them, were being delivered, and they were massively bigger than the ones that I thought were going to come. I can't lift even one end of any one single stick. But there's this a big pile. There's going to be 60 of them, 20 foot long and about a foot in diameter. And from this I'll build this log cabin. And so I've been hunting YouTube and searching all different ways of how someone my size, strength and age can shift and move these timbers in the way that I wish to and build this cabin. And it's this wonderful, lovely feeling that I have that I don't have to rush, that I can take my time. I can play with my dog, I can make a little fire, open fire outside, and I can brew some tea, and I can drink that, and if I wish to I could have a snooze in the chair, and then I'll work again on the next log, and so on. And it must be probably one of the first times in my life, really, this era now that I'm in, where I feel that I can do this. But it's not because in any way my passion or love of this life, or love of this earth, or love indeed of people has diminished. It's more like the realization that I have many more years behind me than I now have ahead of me. That I was born in 1949 and the world was very different. In my birthday on the 28th of April, I'll have 4 years and I'll be 80. And I find it just, I can't quite comprehend it really. But I'm going to build this cabin and it'll be called Mac's Shack. And I want to call it Mac's Shack because when I was 8 and we moved to a new house, as kids we went round the house, we weren't too interested in the house, ran to the back to see the garden. And it was very fortunately, and for us, quite a big garden. And there, 2/3 of the way back, was this thing we called the shack. And in that cabin, we dreamed of a life that we would love to live. I had to be dragged in on Christmas Day because I refused to come in because I was so deep in the dream of the shack and of living in the Yukon or somewhere like that, and not very politically correct now, but probably trapping animals. And in fact, I found a dead squirrel in the street, in the gutter, and I'd taken it into the house and I'd soaked it in creosote and then nailed it on the door. My plan was to make a hat out of this. And my mother was appalled. She amazingly let us do kind of everything. But it was when I staked out this dead squirrel on the lawn, soaked in creosote, and then removed it to put on and this tiny little humanoid imprint of this little creature burnt into the grass just had her, undid her somewhat. But dreaming and dreaming and dreaming of a life that would be filled with a love of all the things that have touched me deepest since I was the tiniest of age, and it's the smell of earth and the trees that I climbed, the tunnels that we dug, the bow that I made, informed by the head gardener, with which I shot my dad once, put him unconscious on the ground. All the wonderment of the freedom that we possessed, and the pain that I began to experience around 15, when I began to realize that the world was not going to offer me this life, that these were things of a child and had no part of an adult life. My mum found me outside our home, glowering up and down on our street, and she said, what's wrong? And I said, I'm staring at my future, and it's extraordinarily boring, and it's so horribly predictable. I'm going to go to a good school, do this, do that, get a good job, have a pension, retire, nice little garden, nice little house, nice little everything. I said, I almost feel like finishing it now. So she's getting a little bit concerned with my 15-year-old angst of this thing. And she said, well, I'm sure it won't be that bad, my dear. And I wasn't convinced. And there came a point when I really did feel that I'd been born into the wrong time. And of the indigenous people who taught me, when they first met me, they said, you feel so saturated in sadness. We're wondering if you wish to live. Do you want to die? Do you want to die, Mac? Because if you want to die, we have a ceremony that helps people die. We can get the drums out now. We can organise it. We'll help you die. Do you want to die? I'm a little bit startled. I'd only just arrived. I'm thinking, no, I don't want to die. They said, we're not convinced. Get the drums. Get the drums. And you're start boom, 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 boom. It works, you know. It really works. We can help you. Just, you want to live. Then a lot of things are going to have to change. A lot of things are going to have to change. We know that you love our Mother Earth. We know that you really love this earth. We understand that rather later you eventually came to love people. It was a bit like that. It was absolutely nature and the earth first, and then grudgingly people. But you have to understand that with love comes responsibility. When you begin to see the size of the task that you've been born to undertake, and by the way, not just you, as I'm speaking to you now, as if you were me at that time, when you begin to understand what is asked of you, you'll want to run away. A part of you will want to run away. A part of you will find every excuse under the sun as to why it's not you but somebody else, because they're brighter, they're more talented, they have greater access to people or money or whatever it is. You will find every way possible. But if you wish to learn from us, then you can't do that. So we want you to start speaking. And I said, what do you mean I start speaking? He said, yeah, speaking publicly. We want you to start speaking about your love of Mother Earth. Yes. And I felt a great surge of relief. So I thought, I can't do that. So that's really good. So I said, well, no, thank you very much, and all that, but I'm utterly terrified about public speaking, and I couldn't possibly do that. And they said, well, if you wish to learn from us, you have to do it. There is no question. You speak. I said, no, I don't think you understand. I become rigid with terror. He said, yeah, that's okay. I thought, they're really not getting this. So I said, okay, well, let's just imagine there's an audience of 100, 200 people, and there's a PowerPoint slide behind me that says Macartney, and the title of the talk is On Behalf of Our Earth. And then I walk on, and everything goes quiet, and I just burst into tears. And I carry on crying for the 40 minutes duration of the whole talk, and then I walk off. And now they're beaming. They said, wow, that would be amazing. That would be really amazing. Oh, do you think you could do that? I said, it's not about thinking I could do it. I'm trying to tell you what it would be like. And they said, who would ever forget that talk? On behalf of our earth, he sobs his heart out for 40 minutes and then walks off the stage. In truth, it is as if we've walked into the most extraordinary conflagration of powers and forces. We who have known for decades and decades and decades now, which we have, that we are worldview, the story that we have been living and working from, the assumptions that we've made, who are pulling the rug from underneath our children's feet and the young of all species. I know that is true because it was 1960, something like that, when we had the first conversation around in my family about what we were doing to the soil, what we were doing to the air, what we were doing to our forests, what we were doing to all these things. It's quite a long time ago. In my family, we were talking about it all the time. It wasn't, we weren't the only family. And every decade, it's got worse. And wonderful things have happened. Wonderful things have happened. And in my work with corporations, at one point, somebody in the team that was dealing with corporations in WWF said to me, "Are you aware, Mac, of all of the huge things that many of the big businesses have done to mitigate the destruction and the pollution and everything else they're doing?" And I said, "Yes, I am. But I'm also aware that they grow and grow and grow. And if you were to balance and say, of all the good things that have happened, is it enough to make any impression on the devastating impact on our national debt?" Then the answer is no. Nowhere close. Nowhere close. And for a period of time, I was on the advisory board for Danone North America. And they made their journey to become a B Corp and really try and put values and integrity deep into that part of Danone, which, by the way, as a multinational, was on this whole journey of making the whole of Danone a B corporation. And I won't go into what that means, but it's the most ethical standard around which corporations could take themselves should they wish, and it's hard. I sat on that advisory group and they became a B Corp in 1 year, immediately becoming the biggest in the world. And 2 years later, Manuel Weber, the chief executive of Danone overall, was fired because he wasn't giving enough thought to profit and growth. I spent time with Barclays Bank at a time when they appointed a CEO who took all his CEOs to Kenya and asked them, "Do we as a bank owe anything to the world's poor?" And it was very clear he felt they did. And all those CEOs, similar number to here, put their hands up and said, "Yes, we do." And so we then took them into the slums of Kibera in Nairobi, where they met poverty with their noses. They smelt it. Every morning the pickup trucks go in and carry out the dead bodies. The prostitutes sit there with their legs wide apart, inviting people. The level of violence and toxicity in that huge, biggest slum district in Africa is just palpable. Those execs walked into it, stepping over prone bodies. We never knew if they were alive or dead. And some of them were absolutely convulsed by the experience. He did all this because he wanted them to really feel, see, smell, touch, taste poverty. At the end of that few days, they all signed up, and I believe they were sincere to the idea that Barclays Bank would really work to make a difference, not through painting schools or doing some little thing with an NGO somewhere, but by trying to use their financial expertise that would enable people with nothing to begin to earn enough to put food on the table and so on. A few years later he was fired because he wasn't giving enough thought to profit and growth, and so this story goes on and on and on and on. So it's not a good story. And yet it's not over yet. So I don't think there will be any point in me saying anything that pretends to make the challenges which now face us smaller than they are. I think they're huge. And at Embercombe, we've said many times the greatest danger we face at this time is not actually climate change or the destruction of nature or all these other things. It is the passivity of huge numbers of good people who could, if they wished, put the full weight of who they are and what they can do towards what we call the children's fire, towards the future of those recently born and those yet to be born of all species. And I want to emphasize, and there's no judgment here, honestly, I really mean it, but it's millions and millions and millions of good people. Because we've all been raised with this story that informs us really that we have some talents, we are fortunate or less fortunate, we receive education, we make choices, and to some degree, not exclusively, but our success is measured by the houses we live in or the cars we drive or the partners that align with us or whatever it happens to be. And many of these, by the way, very successful people are also very, very good people, as there are in every spectrum of society. But there are, I think, for most of us, and sadly I include myself in this, nowhere close to the full potential of who we are. Why would that be? Why would that be when so many of us do love our children? Let's say most of us deeply love our children. When we deeply love the forests and the seas and the beaches, we love the springtime and the sunshine that splashes on our cheek. We love all those moments that are just permeated with beauty. It is as if we as human beings, beauty is a goddess for us. Yet somehow we've twisted it round so it becomes an industry, so that it becomes sort of warped out of shape in some way. But beauty always will be, and kindness, and gentleness, and soft courage, which is so utterly different from bravado, of course. We have never been taught in this way. Why do we not teach self-leadership in our schools and places of higher education? Why would we not do that? When to become a self-leader is probably one of the most important things we can ever do to become in balance with ourselves, to understand our emotional self, to tend to the wounds that we've probably collected, all of us, along the way as we've grown and developed. To answer 3 questions that I like to bring, the first one of which is, what is it that you most deeply and profoundly love? I do not understand why we don't ask that question all the way through a school career, all the way through universities, and even into our businesses and all the different kinds of careers that we have. Because if I ask my little boy, he's 8 years old, what it is that he most deeply and profoundly loves, he'd probably say his mum and dad and Kevo, his elder brother, who's 26, and he'd include Roman, who's another half-brother who's sort of older still. He'd probably include pancakes and chocolate and his skateboard. He's 8. So of course, he answers. He also says the most extraordinary things, like the other day, quite some time ago now, but Dada, I said, yes. I wonder if we're having a dream of being alive. And I said, wow. And then a little while when I went to pop my head in the bedroom to see if he was sleeping okay, he opened his eyes. I thought you were asleep. He said, I'm a bit worried. I said, oh, Kai, what are you worried about? He said, I'm worried about my driving test. Great. He's 8. What is it that you most deeply, the emphasis I want to be on, deeply and profoundly love? But I have asked that question in many, many places, with many different people, and the answer, if you are able to persuade people to be as really, truly honest, the answer from many is, I never have. Deeply and profoundly loved. And with that comes an ocean of loneliness and sadness and a sense of life just slipping past. And that's what a young woman called Fiona, who came to Embercombe, I don't know, 20 years ago now, dying with 3 months left to live, 30 years old. That's what consumed her with grief, was that she had never actually really, she didn't feel that she'd ever truly, deeply and profoundly loved. But she's not alone. For many of us are far too scared to ever deeply and profoundly love. Many of us have difficulty in accessing a place where we could deeply and profoundly love. Many of us have never even thought about it particularly. But why is it so important? Because I think that when you answer that question to that depth, you have defined sacredness for yourself. And it is that you would choose, of course, to put all your gifts for throughout your life. Because you love this thing. It is precious beyond imagining. There are societies that exist where this is a fundamental part of the education of the young people and onwards, because those people understand that it is from this life, this earth, that everything comes. And the community, our strength when we form community. And the insinuation, as it were, the threading of goodwill and trust that can exist between people when we know that they are coming from that place. It doesn't dissolve disagreement. It doesn't take away different points of view, but it means that there is a platform upon which we stand, in which we can trust each other deeply. So the second question is, what are your deepest and most profound gifts? It doesn't say qualifications. It doesn't say even actually what you're good at or like and possibly good at. I'd like to refer you back, say, to that question when they told me I had to speak about that which I love. And I say, I'm terrified. I say, it doesn't matter, we don't care. I'm really terrified. He said, we do not care. Be terrified, speak. Because what else, how could you not speak if you love this thing? Your gifts are quite possibly hidden from you. You need to be curious. You need to deal with the voice inside you that says, inside me, that says that you don't amount to much. You cannot hide behind the thought that others are somehow more beautiful, more talented, more wealthy, more anything else than you. You have to stand there naked in front of life, as it were, and say, let me entertain the hypothesis that I have a gift. And that gift is forgiving. Not once, forever, in all time, generously, profoundly, always. In order to be in that place, you may well have to deal with skeletons, hurts, experiences that have diminished us, that have made us small, that have somehow shrunk us. But there is no excuse if we wish to be in service to that which we love. Honestly, with so many of, again, the people that I and we at Embercombe have worked with have no sense that they have any kind of gift. In fact, the realization that we have is that most people, underneath the veneer of whatever it is they present, have a pretty low opinion of themselves, which is devastating, I think, if one also wishes somehow to have positive impact in the world. But at this one I wanted to add, this doesn't mean to say big things, okay? This doesn't necessarily mean the sort of things around which people write books, make movies, or whatever. This is not measured in that kind of way. So it may be big, it may be noticed, it may never be noticed. And I like to tell this story because it happened to me and my little guy when we were in Sainsbury's. And it was that time of day, and well, firstly, there were mostly people at the checkouts. And it was a time of day when there weren't many people in the store, but there were still people, mostly women, sat at the checkout kiosks. And I said to Kai, who was about 3 or 4, I said, who should we go to with our shopping? So he looks along the line and he says, that lady, something. Now, I have no idea why he chose her, but we go towards that woman. And as we're walking, I'm thinking, was that completely random? You know, I wonder, no idea. We get to this woman and she begins to barcode our shopping and stuff. And as she does it, she engages with us to such an extent that we are, as it were, overwhelmed with her humanity. She was the most, if you put her in a lineup and said, remember these faces, you would never have remembered this person's face. It was as ordinary gets, I suppose. And she shone in experience with us. Her heart was fully open. She laughingly, joyfully, lovingly engages. And I had this sudden feeling, I think we're being blessed. That's what this feels like, whatever that does feel like. I think it feels like that. We're being showered with the gorgeous humanity of this ordinary person who's a checkout lady in Sainsbury's. We walk on, and I'm mulling this thought that if Jesus Christ was ever to come to earth again, he could do worse than become a supermarket checkout person, get a whole line of people just queuing up. But as we get past, I look back, and there she is doing exactly the same thing to the next people. It had nothing to do with that. There was something about us that was appealing. She was being who she was and having impact. So with the group that I mentor, I issued this challenge. Who is going to be the first to see if they can apply to Sainsbury's or some similar organisation and become a checkout person, which they do for 6 months, and just see if they could do anything similar to that woman. Nobody's taken it up yet. I'm still waiting. Gifts may also mean something extremely painful to us, as it did for me. And again, because I like to relay this a little bit, I just share. So I worked out myself, thought, where can I go and speak where nobody really gives a shit? Where they won't probably even notice or remember. And I thought festivals, music festivals. Yeah. I'll go to some music. So I applied to Sunrise Festival, which was still running then, and I got a gig speaking in a yurt somewhere. And so, you know, for months beforehand, I was like sweating about having to give this talk, but I needed to be able to contact my Indigenous mentors to tell them that I'd actually done it. So I drive for several hours, I finally arrive at the festival, I find the yurt, I go in there, and I'm immensely relieved to find there's only 3 people there. So happy about that. 2 of them are asleep. Sorry, one of them was asleep. One of them was asleep. I settled myself down and I realised that the other 2 are in the early stages of having sex. So I plough on with my talk. The first one remains asleep, and the other 2 move to the latter stages. So we all kind of arrive at the same place at the same time. And I'm so happy, because nobody's giving a blind bit of notice to me. And I gave that talk. The second talk was another festival. I'd just been to India with those another little group of execs, and I had to keep rushing to the toilet. So as I gave my talk in this yurt, I had to keep saying, hold on a second, while I ran out of the yurt to the bushes somewhere, relieved myself, came back and tried to pick up the thread of where I was. The third time was a Women's Institute in a village in Devon, where we all stood and sang Jerusalem together, which apparently is what they do. I don't know if they still are. And then I spoke to this little group of women there, all of whom were silver-haired, as it were. And at the end, they gave me a standing ovation. There was about 10 of them, I think. And one of them kept shouting out, you know, what was it? We're activists as well, or something like that. It was just like, they were lovely. Each time was hard, and each time it got a little bit easier. So gifts. If having an adventure and a journey appeals to you, then the searching for that gift is really crucial. And if the voice inside you says, still it won't stay quiet, I don't really have a gift, then you have just, as it were, walked into the cage and turned the key, and I guess then that's it. The third question, what are your deepest and most profound responsibilities? Well, it seems to me, in the village where Embercombe is located, that most people to whom that question is ever related have understood that their responsibilities end at the boundary of their property and their own immediate family. And it doesn't really go beyond that. So Gaza, Sudan, Ukraine, many, many parts of our own towns and cities, I'm sure, including here in Henley. No. What are your deepest and most profound responsibilities? How could it possibly be that we've been educated to believe that our responsibilities are so circumscribed, so small, so selfish even, so self-serving? When and if we're prepared to take the answers to those questions, and you know what you love deeply and profoundly, and you've made the effort over an extended period of time that continues, I think, for a lifetime, to understand the gifts that you carry, and you've also taken on board the responsibilities that you have, I would say you become a force, a power. It's pretty big and will have impact. Because if we were to talk about leadership as to what I think it really means, it is a person of profound integrity who embodies this in action. And most of us, as it were, maybe our course is a bit like this. I know mine is. You know, sometimes we're braver, sometimes we're less brave, sometimes we have more integrity, sometimes we have less. But are we willing and interested to try and sail that course? The two Hoi Maori who I met and when, some years back were rather amazing with this, because we were talking about retirement, and I was saying, well, do you have a concept of retirement within Maori culture? And they were laughing and said, yes, we do. We retire our young people between 15 and sort of 28, because it's hopeless. We just boot them out of the village and say, go and do what you have to do and do it not, whatever it is. Because we understand that's what you need to do. And when you come back, now you're in service to the people. And we expect a lot. And then when you're 10 years older, we bring you in front of the council and we say, okay, so you're warmed up. Now we need you to really shift gear and really start to give. And then we roll this another 10 years and it just goes on. Until when you're 70, 80, whatever, we say, now you're on a surfboard, you're creaming it on the waves. You are the embodiment of an authentic person of real integrity. You are a story to the people of what it might mean to be a human being. So there's never any let-up. And it's so helpful to us as we grow older. Instead of, you've had your time, thanks very much, you don't look very pleasant anymore, so you've served your time, go on a cruise. You say, no, you stay in the center. When I was at a ceremony with the people that used to teach me at one time, I saw these groups of young people being brought in. Young girls. This is of that culture, I hasten to add, not in this culture. They said, well, who are all these young women being brought in? They said they've all tried killing themselves in the last few months. Because now within that culture they are forming suicide pacts when 30 at a time go down. And as a people we are weeping. And we call them into this ceremony that they should be here and know that we love them. And that with their death goes our future. And that they are precious beyond everything. They, them, and the young of all species. So there was a question. I think Dave put out a question of whether things of interest to any of you. And one person wrote in about young people and how do we assist our young people in sustaining hope or building hope for a future when all around, in almost every place you look, you find something that is extremely discouraging. So my feeling is, we know that in many cases, and by no means not all, I'm thinking of those who might be in their teens here, that during that period of life, as parents, we may find it pretty difficult. As our young people are negotiating the threshold that goes from child to adult. And a lot of things are happening for those young people. All sorts of shifts and changes are taking place. But more than ever they need us loving them, standing for them, trustworthy. And though there will still be arguments and fights and disagreements and whatever else, that there is no question of and this is not about just standing there handing out advice. It's not about all of that. It's about really being with And most importantly, I think, not taking it personally when it's rejected or pushed back. Because how does a young of any kind know who they are without pushing back? Kai is still of an age and a size where I can, as it were, impose my will. He's the tallest in his class, which I don't understand because I'm certainly not tall and neither is my wife. But at the rate of speed at which he's growing, he's going to be somewhere here. And I think he's going to be powerfully built as well. Kai? Yeah. You can't do that. I can imagine this. Actually, Dad, I can. This between us right now is really important. Really important for him because he may grow that big, but I will be his dad. And he needs to know that he can trust me and that I will be there for him. He also needs to know that I will call him out when things happen that are around which I need to name. And he needs to know that when I screw up, make mistake, lie, cheat, anything, that if he calls me out, that I will not squirm my way out of it. He needs to know that I'm interested in him and will do all kinds of things to him, including getting out of the way. Now, I also think, and I'm not sure what you might think of this, but I'm not actually a big proponent of hope. Because the way we use hope is almost very close, it seems to me, to wishful thinking. We kind of hope things will work out okay. It's a bit like saying we don't think they're going to, but maybe they will. So I've never felt really sure that hope is a strong enough platform for me to stand on. So I go back to that question, what is it most deeply and profoundly love? And that place says to me that irrespective of how things work out, I will still do what I need and feel called to do. For as long as I have breath in my body, I will do it because it is in service to that which I love. Even if it looks impossible and hopeless, I will not give up. Because to do that would be to betray myself and everything that is important to me. Now, many of our young people, perhaps, could be assisted to such a place, saying, honestly, we don't know how things are going to work out. We do know that it's really serious. We also know that if enough people rose and brought their voices and their actions and everything forward, we would greatly increase the possibility of things in some way or other working out, or at least the difficult outcomes being mitigated to some degree. But we need them to feel privileged to have been born at a time like this. Which I do, you see, because that 15-year-old who stood looking up and down the street depressed and bored with all the sameness that I saw around me, all the predictability I saw around me, I needed an adventure. I needed to feel that this life could count. I think it does count. But I'm not under any illusion that I'm going to make some kind of massive difference. I just might make a difference, one person and one person and one person and one person. And that's what Embercombe is trying to do, the valley where I'm at. That's what we're trying to do. We're in no fantasy that somehow we're going to do some great heroic task. We just know we must stand by that which we love. We must, if we wish to call ourselves or imagine or walk towards being trustworthy people. And also, it really helps to know what you love because you retain your sense of humour. And you can laugh and joy and play. And who wouldn't want to? This spring that comes, my realization, how many more? 1, 10, 15? Not many. I want to love every spring. Every time I will catch the scent of bluebells again. Every kiss, every hug, every smile, every log from that log cabin, every stick thrown for Ted, my dog, every playtime with Kai. How Walla taught him how to ride his bike, taught him how to climb trees, encouraged him, taught him how to swim. Oh, these are privileged moments. And by the way, I did all those same things also with my wife. Because when she came from Kenya, because she's Kikuyu, she wouldn't go anywhere near a river like this or a lake, for fear of crocodiles. She knew there were no crocodiles in Britain, but somehow in her gut it was not safe. So one time I took her to a hotel on the Cornish coast, and we were there, and there was a swimming pool. I said, shall we go to the swimming pool? And to my great surprise, she said yes, and we went. And I was second out of the changing room, and I came in, she's swimming. She'd never swam before. She just took her feet off the bottom and started swimming. She'd never swum before. She swam. So it's not really quite true that I taught her how to swim. I just realised that. To play means we have to take risks. To be foolish. To be silly. To be fun. Our house is full of silliness. At Embercombe, in particular on certain of the programmes, I've sort of, I don't think I come across as silly. I rather hope I don't. It's me, but it's me in that context. When I get home, nobody gives a toss what I say really any more than anybody else. We are just a family. We josh with each other, we make fun of each other, we play, we're silly, we do all this stuff. There's a lot of laughter. And every now and then, shouts of outrage and distress and all the rest of it, the dog, the cat. Of course, it should be like that, shouldn't it? It's home. This time, everything that is beautiful is calling to us, saying, do you care? Do you care enough to inconvenience yourself? Do you care enough not to other and not to subscribe to the story of them and us, which many people who are tempted to do good things in this world do, I believe. We have people turn up at Embercombe sometimes, every now and then somebody comes, why are you here? Because I was sent. By my partner, thought it would straighten me out. So tell us about yourself. And the last one, he says, my name's Pete and I'm from South East London, that's it. Well, welcome Pete, hi, good to know you. Yeah, he said, I don't want to be here. I said, you don't have to be here, the car park's over there. He said, yeah, no, I'll stick around. I said, fine, stuck around. Gradually, over the course of 2 days, he's like an iceberg, he begins to melt. Until in the end, when they're checking out, he says, I'm Pete from South East London, and everyone's laughing because he's completely changed. He's taken the risk to let the shield down and show us who he actually is, and he's a sweet man. A good person, but a person whom life has taught that it's better to stay safe than risk connection. I don't know what's happened now. Maybe he's put the shield up again, I don't know. Maybe he hasn't. But I would love you, when you leave here this evening, to consider, in fact I feel I will have failed really, if tonight when you leave here, you do not give some time to thinking, does any of this have something to do with me? Do I know what I love? Do I know what my gifts are? Am I aware of my responsibilities? Are they small and contracted? Could they expand? Am I trustworthy? Am I kind? Do I have real courage? Do I play certain games, like one that's on call a spade, you know, which is, I often thought, you know, a person who calls a spade, says it how it is, you know. Well, there is something good about straight talking and everything, but if it can easily become just something you hide behind. Something we've recognised as people get older, many of us know this, as we get older, we often become more and more rigid in our way of thinking, more fixed in our opinions, less open to listening, more to, as it were, giving advice. That is the inverse to what should happen. Which doesn't mean to say you don't have any opinions, but you do not walk with your opinions in front of you, as it were. Because the elders in the Maoris say they give most of their attention to listening and seeking understanding. And the opponent, as it were, is disarmed through that approach of understanding that we need to form relationship, not to just batter and bang, because most people attacked will do what most of us would do, which is simply attack back. And it doesn't mean to say you just accept or roll over. It just means that you're somewhere in your heart, you know that you are seeking connection to that person. So I give one little example, you know, when the stone circle at Embercombe was first put in place, and we had this construction company who were going to send their people on leadership work. And they first of all sent their director of health and safety or something to come and view the site and check that it was safe. So we're walking along the track in Embercombe and he spots the stone circle. He said, oh yeah, he said, is that real? I said, well, what? He said, that stone circle, is it real? You know, last time I was there, it certainly felt real, and the rocks are hard. And no, he said, you know what I mean, is it old? I said, is it old? Well, the rocks are really old, you know, millions. No, he said, you know, is it fake? I said, no, it's not fake. You're not really getting anywhere. I said, all right, was it recently constructed? I said, yes, it was. I said, well, does that make it unreal? He said, well, it's not old, is it? I said, but is that what defines real and unreal? It has to be old. He said, well, you know, it's an ornament, isn't it? But I said, oh, I can tell you, of the indigenous people who requested it's built, and those of us who were involved in it, it was a serious undertaking. Yeah, well, what's it all about anyway? So we walk over to the stone circle. I said, you know what, John, or I can't remember his name, I said, you're one of those stones, I'm one of those stones. And all people of all different ways of thinking are one of those stones. Those stones are all nationalities of this earth. Those stones are the humans and the plants and the insects and the animals. Those stones represent always, and the story is everybody has a place in the circle, and we are stronger together than separate. So I'm glad that your company sent you to us, because you understand a lot of the things around this health and safety piece that we do not understand, and your expertise will help us make sure your people are safe. But it might be helpful if you thought that your people, your bosses, chose to send your people to us. Why? Because they think this stone has something to offer that will help your people become more skillful in whatever in their work. And suddenly he relaxes and, it's quite nice. Anyway. Yeah, I think it's quite nice as well. We wander on and carry on. But he's not an enemy. Not an enemy. Just a guy who's got used to things being fake and untrue and unreal and doesn't trust. And I knew that my real sole role in that walking around with him was that he should feel welcomed, appreciated, his point of. So I'm going to come to a close in just a moment. I'm sure that last time I was here I spoke about the children's fire, but just in case there's anybody here who wasn't there or knows nothing about it, I just want to bring it. The story of the children's fire says that when the chiefs sat in council, they were not allowed to take their seat in the council circle unless they had taken the pledge of the children's fire. A little fire was kindled in the center of the circle, called the children's fire. And the pledge that the chiefs had to make, men and women, before they took their seats, was no law, no decision, no action, nothing of any kind will be permitted to go out from this circle of chiefs that will harm the children. Ever. No law, no decision, no action, nothing of any kind will be permitted to go out from this circle of leadership that will harm, pull the rug out from under the children, not just human, of all species. Only when you've taken that pledge could you sit in the council. Now, doesn't it make sense? Can you imagine in the Houses of Parliament if once a year, when Black Rod does his thing and bangs on them, whatever, or however it works, that a small flame was brought in and reiterated to all the MPs was the Children's Fire Pledge, and made it clear to every single one of those people that their first obligation, their first allegiance was to this promise, not to their party loyalty, not to the whips, not to anything, to this. It would not remove all disagreement. But if we could believe that every promise had been made with sincere heart, it would be a very good place to begin. And we imagine if it was the same in every staff room of every school, in the faculty of every university, in the boardroom and on the ground floor of every business, in our homes and our families. If we were to imagine, then it would mean the complete reorientation of our society, indeed our world. So now pause and think, why do we not do that? Why are we so far away from the very common sense that speaks to? And even if we felt no chance of success, would we still do what we think to be the right thing? Because it is the right thing. I don't know how many of you live in Marlow. And I don't know how many of you are here. Do you know, Dave? Roughly?
Total 15,000?
50?
15,000 in the
No,
town?
no, right in this
80.
80. Unleashed upon Marlow. 80 people from that principle. Moving unseen in all different aspects. There would be impact. Sustained over time. It's not a today thing or next week thing. It's a forever thing. Forever and ever thing. And I just say again, this that I speak about is very important to me. And I will do my utmost to live up to it. And of course I will fail, and have failed many times. So you fall down. And the only thing you have to do at that point is get up again. And that was said to me in one ceremony when I stumbled and fell. Lack of water over 3-4 days and very, very hot conditions. I stumbled and fell, ground into the dirt. And I really thought I was finished. And one of them knelt next to me and whispered in my ear, "Mac, how do you define failure?" Which I didn't find particularly helpful at the time. And I said something like, "Yeah." He said, "Failure has nothing to do with not achieving some goal or other. Failure is not getting up after you've fallen. Get up." I got up and continued the ceremony. So do not let us ever imagine that failure is the end of the story. It's whether you get up or not is the end of that story. Well, thank you very much indeed for giving me. I have no idea how long I've been speaking for. I hope it's not too long, but I really appreciate your attentiveness. And I really appreciate having been invited back to come back to Marlow. And I really appreciate Dave, the invitation, and Sarah as well, and all others who've been involved in any way in setting this up. So I'll hand back to you, Sarah.
An hour of power. Now, anyone who's a rower will know about that and how you can push your body in that way, but how you moved our souls in that hour was extraordinary. Thank you. I do want to give you a chance to ask some questions for Mac. So I know a few of you have sent them before and you held those beautifully, but please be brave. This is the moment. If you're afraid to speak, I hear you. I, like Mac, was the 14-year-old who would not speak in class. And if you put me in those chairs, I find it really hard because I'm straight back at school. So I'm going to give you some bravery right there and ask you to speak up. What questions do you have? Sorry, that's the... Rick.
Yeah, thanks, Mac. Really profound in terms of that question of what you profoundly love. But I wonder how many people are like Pete from South East London.
How many people?
Are like Pete from South East London.
So how?
And too afraid to even look at that question. Yeah, so Pete's just terrified. He's come to Embercombe, he's in your presence. But he, probably like the MPs, probably like so many other people, are too terrified to get anywhere near that. So how do we help Pete from South East London and everyone else kind of open their heart a little bit more?
Yeah, you know, I would say that how we meet people. When Kids Company was alive and going in London, all these young people from extraordinarily traumatic backgrounds, Kids Company would be mentored and held through things, but at a certain stage they came to Embercombe and they come down the track and we'd hear them before we, could see them. And they're of all different ethnicities, as it were, and they are the most vibrantly alive crowd, and they've never even, not a question of left London, they've never left their bit of London. And they're on a Devon, on the edge of Dartmoor. But we loved it when they came. They were anarchic, they were incredible. But all they needed from us was to be shown respect and welcomed. And I really do feel that not all, because let's not live in fantasy land, but many and perhaps even most people who feel they're not being met with judgment, but are being met with genuine sort of inquiry, if being met with a measure of warmth and hospitality that is not over the top, it's not just silly, that are with us for long enough to feel that we are actually real. So being real somehow, and not hiding that we have different point of view or something, but somehow being genuinely in that place. I think many. And we have had that again and again. And to be honest, it hasn't worked every time, because some people leave before, and it does take some time. And I am also convinced that there will be people that have come to Embercombe and experienced some profound shift and gone back into the place where they learnt how to shield themselves, protect themselves, and probably reverted. But even then they would know at some point. And so, and many, and this is something we want to give much more emphasis now to, is how do we then support people after they've left. But this is just Embercombe, but it's the same everywhere. And in my work, I mean, I have met an awful lot of people with very different kind of political and whatever things different from me. But I've noticed, and also wealth-wise, I mean, you know, people are extraordinarily wealthy and in utterly different circumstances. But I think somehow we've found a way. And I think that's to me the most powerful. But I want to emphasize, it's never about being soppy. It's not about being somehow acquiescent to something that we find, you know, unacceptable. But again, you know, if we were willing to, which is a big ask, but what made Trump the way he is, let's say, if I can use that example? I'm sorry, Andy. Well, if there's any Trump lovers here, then you could take that as a compliment. You know? But what made that man that way? Somebody told me a story about that, which I have no idea is true, probably untrue, but they said that he was in a bunk bed when he was a little child, and his dad stood down there saying, "Jump, I'll catch you." He jumped, and his dad stepped aside. He smashed onto the floor, and his father said, "Never trust anyone." You know, now I have no idea, but I know that things will have happened to that child that helped and assisted the growing into that person. What happened to many of the people who we are now frightened of that somehow supported them in growing in the way they became? But that's another thing. I realized a lot of people whom I found most challenging in my life underneath are frightened. And that happened at one time when I was in the running courses in the leadership centre, and I suddenly had this flash that these people who seemed so intimidating were actually really nervous about what the week held. And it really helped me, because in the way that I could then have somehow puffed up and tried to appear tough in front of them and emphasize what a hard time they were going to have. But, you know, of course I chose a different path. And within a very short time, they were loving it. I think that's the way I know. I was sharing with Sarah and Dave earlier this afternoon an incident where I got into an argument with some manager in one of the big corporations around something like what we're doing to the soil or something. We just head-butted all evening on the back of 2 or 3 glasses of wine, and at the end everybody else had left. They were bored, rigid, and they left, and we were left exhausted at the table. And I remember as we stumbled our way to our rooms thinking, I'll never do that again, because it doesn't work. Nobody conceded any territory. It doesn't work. If I had been able to say to him at the time, that's really interesting, how do you arrive at that point of view? And he'd say, and I said, no, I would like to know what makes you think that that's that. If I'd been able to somehow find that, perhaps we would have got to a different place. And you won't win all. Yeah.
Thank you. My name's Debbie. I've lived in Marlow 15 years now, and the question I gave to Dave previously is, how do we build or develop compassion in our own community? I know people who've been to Embercombe. I know people that have benefited tremendously from it. I haven't been myself. But my job, if you like, I feel, is how do I put into place the sort of things that you're talking about? How, in our community, it seems to me such a huge task, even in a small town. People who go to Embercombe come back, they have something very special that they can then pass on. But how can we, as a group of people, how can we keep it up? How can we not get defeated? How can we hold on to that dream of the sort of compassionate society?
Yeah. Thank you for that. So, the first thing I'd like to say is that we will never build compassion in others if we're not compassionate to ourselves. And in my experience, that's a relatively rare thing. It has to do with many of us secretly and under the surface feeling somewhat unworthy and not particularly self-respectful. So let's take that as the first, I would say. After that, we have to take risks. And we have to begin to understand that taking risks is a normal part of living a life. And it's what we did all the time when we were little. Learning how to walk, learning how to talk, learning how to socialize. So we have to reach across. We have to begin to understand that if we desire something to be the case, we can't simply wait to receive. We have to activate and therefore risk disinterest or turn away. We have to, in my language, have knelt by the children's fire, as it were, and promised that this will not be a one-off, and it's not a decision, it's not predicated on that people respond in the way we wish them to, which we don't give up. So we're starting something at Embercombe. Some of them are already going to do more, called fire circles. Now, fire circle is simply where there's a fire, and let's say you invite a little group of people, 6 or something, to your home, back garden if you have one, a fire bowl, have one or can get one, and you simply say to people, we're all people living our lives, going through different experiences. What this circle is about listening to each other. So, with your permission, I will be the person that holds this circle. And the question to each person is, how are you doing? What's happening for you? But the request is that you answer honestly, truthfully, and take some risk in what you share. Now, we do this at Embercombe, different call, and we notice that initially it's a rather chilly sort of process. But as people get to relax, then they begin to share something. It only takes one person to go a little bit further, and suddenly it begins to ripple around the circle. People are warming by a fire. First of all, let's remember this is what we were doing for thousands upon thousands of years. Sat around a fire, sharing stories, listening to each other. If it goes halfway okay, you say to the folk, what do you think about we do this, maybe every couple of months? If enough people then say, yeah, that's nice, yeah, let's do that. So then you do it again. Let's imagine in the end this becomes a circle which really begins to trust each other and feel this is a safe place. And there's confidentiality also established as a way of operating, that no stories will be shared outside the circle. People feel good. Now it's got some traction. And then one day, the person holding says, is there anyone in this circle who'd be willing to go home if they have a garden or find a place, get a fireball, invite some friends round and do the whole thing? Maybe there's somebody in the circle who'd be willing to join them, to help them, support them do this. Now we have 2 fire circles. We've got something like, we haven't even begun this yet, we've got something like four fire circles operating now. If out of all that 4, we then gradually got more. So I feel it's step by step. And it doesn't have to be fire circles, except that I love it, because when do we ever get to speak and really feel listened to? Could be the symbol of we're all warm by the same fire. Somewhere, I think, deep in our memory is that we know this. We did it before. We don't say bring alcohol and whatever, or smoke a joint or whatever it is. It happens to be anybody's thing. We say, no, not in this space. This is just us here. But let's say there'll be some food prepared afterwards, so we could have some food. Maybe not. We find it really powerful. We don't divulge what happens on the journey program at Embercombe. I'll share with you a secret. One of the reasons we don't share it is because it's so banal. It's so mind-blowingly simple. We don't share it because we know that people say, well, if that's all it is, I don't need to pay whatever it is to come and do that. Well, one of the things we do is we have that circle. There is a skill in just setting the circle up, but we will when the time comes. But I'm not saying this is necessary. The circles are going at the moment. The people haven't been trained, they've just started. But to help people understand how you might hold a circle, set agreements around confidentiality, etc., ask the group for permission, that they give you the authority to say when somebody's going on, to stop them, when someone is beginning to speak directly in judgment of another, to stop that. But I think as a symbol that I'm sharing with you, I think it works. Do we know our neighbours? Do we reach across in any shape or form? The lady at Sainsbury's, for me, is a wonderful example. How did she sustain that when we know that many people in those roles get shouted at, abused, threatened? Everything said to me that she is steady with that. She will not be deterred. I think it also relates to what I was saying to the last question, which is that we meet people with respect, we meet them with interest, we meet them with, genuineness, and many people are actually quite lonely or quite feeling on the outside and will respond. Beyond that, I don't know, really. Yeah.
Hi there, I'm Kate from Greener Henley. We do climate and nature engagement and mobilisation. You alluded a little bit to the climate and nature emergency and the precarious state we're in and what that means for future generations and the children's fire and so on. I'm interested in understanding how you think we bring about that mass mobilisation that needs to happen within communities like Marlow and Henley.
I think if I knew that, I think my honest answer is I don't know. That doesn't mean to say I've given up, but I don't know. I do think, I have theory, that if enough people began to speak up and speak out and take the risk, then it could become possible. So if you were a teacher and you began to advocate for a true and real education of our children so that no young person leaves school without feeling good about who they are. If we were to say that academic achievement cannot be the sole and primary purpose of that education, it must be a whole human being. If we were to introduce all sorts of things about the quality of the human, if we're a songwriter, in the last half dozen songs we've sung about in the last half dozen failed relationships, we say to that person, could you sing a song? Could you write a song that inspires, that brings people up? I am of a generation, and I don't wish, but the music that we listened to was like we really believed the world was going to change. Because the music, the words, the music was so inspiring. Earth, Mother, your children are here. And so the songs go, Jefferson Airplane, and all these things. I'm not talking about popular, but much of it was powerful. It's a call to action. If our head of site at Embercombe gathers the volunteers and the people who are going to spend their day cleaning out gutters, fixing pipes and all the rest of it, and just shares with them. The work that we do is part of that enables all of this to happen. Let's listen from each person. Let's understand how we are part and parcel of this thing that is, it's a little bit like are you building a wall or building a cathedral, that sort of thing. If all of us in all our different roles, any groups we belong to, any clubs we belong to, by the way, if we were, many of us, to really take a look, if we do message or use any of social media, ask ourselves how we're using it. And whether those very same qualities that I was speaking of before are resonant in everything that we put out through, all the different social media channels. I think if we're brave enough and we've got an idea that we think might bring social cohesion, will we say, I'll only do this if I can find a whole bunch of others who will support me? Or do we say, actually, I only need one, let's say, and then we'll begin? Will it work? I don't know. But I do know that it certainly won't work if we don't do it. And I think in the end, that's what it boils down to. You cannot be conditional upon others doing it. That's why when I engage in these sort of talks, I always think to myself, it will not be conditional. I will do what I know I need to do, irrespective. And a big thing that makes a difference, I mean, I did feel this before little Kai arrived in my life. But now when I kiss him goodnight, when I look at that little sleeping form, I think it would be the worst betrayal I could ever imagine, that I didn't do everything within my power to stand for that little life. But it's not just him, It's like Ted, my dog, I love that wonderful, boisterous, vibrant. He's a New Zealand Hunterway crossed with Black Lab. He's got he loves children, loves people, loves playing. He's not an aggressive bone that I've ever seen in his body. He's powerful. But we go out every night, we go out walking, and he can see and sense things I can't see. And I find it so exciting, you know, it's lovely. I want him to have a good life. I want him to be who he is. And I look at some, you know, I gave a talk at the Childhood Summit in Brisbane once, and I was informed that Australia used to be the country where children spent most time out of doors playing unstructured play. Streams, riverbanks, lakes, woods, forests. Now they are one of the least of all nations, because somehow the story's gone through society that it's dangerous and keep the kids in case. And so they're all inside watching their screens, as it were. And once, as many of us will know, once it goes there, it's very hard to unpick it. I wonder if it'd be that question, by the way. If you manage to find half a dozen folk here and sit round and say the same question, and maybe there'll be some thoughts, and then there'll be something that thinks, yes, let's action that, let's do that, and you do it. Is it guaranteed success? No, it isn't. So, yeah. We can't do it conditionally. It has to be unconditional. Give it best shot. Get up when you fall down. That's it. I wish some of these things were simpler. Although I think that is pretty simple, isn't it, really? But in some way I wish it was, but it doesn't seem to be. Time for one more?
It was a wonderful talk, and I was curious because you said that early on you loved nature and you loved the earth, but you didn't love people. I think we are quite a difficult species to love in ourselves, but also, you know, we're destructive, we're cruel, sometimes we enjoy that cruelty. How did that change for you?
The question was, I said that I loved nature and all things of nature first, and rather latterly came to love people. And that is the truth. So I have a condition called, I haven't had it formally diagnosed, but I think it's a form of dyslexia called dyscalculia. That meant that everything to do with numbers or ways of thinking similar, I'm unable to do. So I was, all my school career, I was 25th out of 25 in the D stream. I was the most stupid child in the whole year round. My brothers excelled as academics, and the family was academic and intellectual, but also very loving, as it happened. And they were kind with me. Well, I felt awful about it. Because in those days it wasn't like now, we were beaten regularly for not getting the right answer, and we were always bleeding afterwards. This is when I was sent away to school. I grew up with a feeling that people are dangerous and mostly can't be trusted, and all of those sort of things. And I think it was also all written into the whole ethos of the school, written about competition, of course, and not much about anything else. But I think I did commit myself to this journey of what actually would I like this life to look like. I thought, I want to be a decent human being. More than anything, I'd like to be a trustworthy human being. I'd like to be someone who, you know, and this was quite an ask, because I was many things not like that, but That's what I wanted. And I thought, that's worth a bit of effort. And what do I really respond to? Well, once in my school career, I was with one of the teachers and I was very upset because I felt I'd been slighted and disrespected in some way. And it was okay in those days. He put his arm around my shoulder. He said, you know, Mac, he was like that. He said, you're an intellectual. And at that point, I bunched my fist, whirled round, and I was going to just smash him in the jaw because I thought he was, taking the mickey. And as I was there in that place, I looked at his face, I suddenly realised he meant it. And I burst into tears. And he just held me like that. He said, something like, it's going to be okay. But you're going to have to walk a long path. And gradually you will come to realise there is much more to you than you currently think. And I think acts of kindness like that have huge impact. They did on me. Acts of generosity, acts of going the extra mile had massive impact. I was so open to things like that. I also think that I am very fortunate in that I was loved and treated well at home. Which many of us have not had. So I had that. And I think it became more and more important to me to open up to the possibility that actually nature is bigger than oceans and trees and animals, and actually does include all of us as well. We are nature. I do have difficulty with this thing of all animals on are really quite decent people, the way they sometimes treat the people that serve us food in restaurants. Why would we do that if we were really, truly had soft strength through us? We wouldn't do that. So I think that, this is the pathway. We have choice. And when we make the wrong choice, we correct it in whatever way is necessary. And that can be really difficult. So I made that shift, and gradually as that happened, I think my heart opened. And I began to conceive of this person who, when he was 16, chose fights with people in the A stream for the joy of beating them up. Because it felt so satisfying as a daystream person that they should see me. Gradually thinking, this is rather embarrassing actually, and it's really infantile. And I'm only doing it because I'm hurting and they're actually really quite nice persons. So gradually stepping away, different choices. Good people. Choosing friends well. I didn't always choose my friends very well. But now I think I can say, people are most definitely wrapped inside this appreciation of the world. And whatever I see outside that's ugly is also in here. And I need to remember that. And the compassion question as well. The more I've learnt of my capacity on that spectrum, the more compassionate I think I've become in the way that I attempt to meet others. And very difficult when it occurs is then to apologise if an apology is needed, but never to apologise if there's nothing to apologise for. Because that's a way of somehow becoming obsequious in order to somehow curry favour. That's a pretty fine line. I find it tricky, but feels worthwhile. Cool. Thank you.
you so much, Mac. I think the ripple effects is what I take away from that. The choices that we make, that one pebble that you drop in the pond, or the energy you show up with, will make those ripples. And we have to start and keep stepping forward and getting up again. Thank you all. You've listened brilliantly. Well done, every one of you who asked questions and stayed present with this extraordinary 2 hours that we have spent together. I hope you feel galvanised. I hope, and I do believe in hope, actually, because for me, it gives us the energy. It gives us the energy. So I deeply press into that. We've got another hour, I think, in this room. Just before we send you on your way safely, please, I want to thank everyone who helped us get to this point. So, Dave, I need to mention you. Thank you. And for everyone who set this club up today and has a part in us being here today. So, thank you all. And finally, I want to thank you, Mac. Extraordinary. Thank you so much for what you shared.